After studying this module, you shall be able to know the importance of infrastructure for economic development, identify the change in infrastructure model from monopoly to competition, and then analyze the experiences of privatization of infrastructure. For much of the 20th century, most countries relied on government ownership and regulation to promote socially equitable access to network infrastructure services, including electricity, telecommunications, water and sewerage, natural gas, and transportation, using mechanisms such as non-exploitive pricing, non-discriminatory coverage, and universal service. 1. Reflecting infrastructure's strategic importance and concerns about monopoly power, it was widely believed that these sectors could not be entrusted to the signals, motivations, and penalties of free markets. But in recent decades, this consensus has changed, resulting in far-reaching restructuring, privatization, and other reforms of crucial infrastructure sectors and services. Role of infrastructure in economic development. There is a precise link between infrastructure and development. Infrastructure investment directly affects the economic development. Therefore, the only way to build up a country's productive potential and raise per capita income is to expand the capacity for producing goods. This need not refer simply to the provisions of plant and machinery, but also to roads, railways, power lines, water pipes, schools, hospitals, houses, and even incentive consumer goods such as consumer durables, all of which can contribute to increased productivity and higher living standards. The prosperity of a country depends directly upon the development of agriculture and industry. Agriculture production, however, requires power, credit, transport facilities, etc. Industrial introduction requires not only machinery and equipment, but also skilled manpower, management, energy, credit facilities, marketing facilities, transportation services, which includes railways, roads, shipping, communication facilities, etc. All these facilities and services constitute collectively the infrastructure of an economy. Regions with inadequate infrastructure usually have lower per capita income, bigger proportion of the primary sector, and smaller population density. Regions with high infrastructure level usually have higher per capita income, a smaller proportion of the primary sector, and bigger population density. The regions which are having a good basic facilities like health, educational, transport, communication, water, sanitation, energy, housing, etc., it will attract more investments, especially the small and marginal entrepreneurs start their production activities. Good transportation, low cost of electricity, availability of skilled labor, facilities always have negative effects on the cost of production and positive effects on production as well as on profit levels. Inadequate infrastructure and services become the burden for infrastructure suppliers and lead to the low efficiency of output. World Development Report of 1994, published by the World Bank under the title Infrastructure for Development, rightly mentions that the adequacy of infrastructure helps to determine one country's success and another's failure in diversifying production, expanding trade, coping with population growth and reducing poverty or improving environmental conditions. Socioeconomic development can be facilitated and accelerated by the presence of social and economic infrastructure. It has been universally recognized that an adequate supply of infrastructure services is an essential ingredient for productivity and growth. If these facilities and services are not available in that place, development will be very difficult. It will lead to negative effect on the production activities of the economy, which means lower levels of production capacity always leads to the underutilization of the resources, scarcity of goods and services. People will spend more money for obtaining basic needs and facilities. It can be linked to a very scarce commodity that can only be secured at a very high price and costs. The pursuit of higher level of welfare for the citizens of the countries in the era of globalization requires efficiency, productivity and growth in all spheres of economic activities. A well-functioning infrastructure including electric power, road and rail connectivity, telecommunications, air transport and efficient ports are required for rapid growth. Without any of these, either economic production will suffer or the quality of life will deteriorate. One could thus view these activities as essential inputs to the economic system. In this respect, adequate and efficient infrastructure is crucial because of its impact on efficiency and growth of other economic activities and in turn on the welfare of the society. Apart from growth linkages, infrastructure has a direct relationship with environment, health, poverty, equity and the general quality of life. The higher affluence of the developed countries with advanced infrastructure bears testimony to this relationship. The importance of infrastructure for sustained economic development is well recognized. High transaction costs arising from inadequate and inefficient infrastructure can prevent the economy from realizing its full growth potential regardless of the progress on other fronts. The performance of infrastructure is largely a reflection of the performance of the economy. For much of the 20th century and in most countries, network utilities like electricity, telecommunication, railroads, water supply, natural gas were vertically and horizontally integrated state monopolies under ministerial control. Infrastructure's enormous economic importance, a desire to protect the public interest in industries supplying essential services, and concerns about private monopoly power led governments to conclude that control over these services could not be entrusted to the motivations and penalties of free markets. Governments also believed that given the large investments involved, public resources were required to increase infrastructure coverage. Accordingly, a single public entity usually controls every aspect of utility, facilities, operations and administration and determines which services should be provided to essentially captivate the customers. The past decade has seen dramatic change in views about how network utilities should be owned, organized and regulated. The new model calls for increased reliance on private infrastructure to improve efficiency, promote innovation and enhance services. Network utilities provide crucial services for manufacturing and commerce and thus significantly influence the growth of national production. Thus, economic development depends on such infrastructure, and failure to reform and modernize it undermines national competitiveness, and there is a risk of economic stagnation. Natural monopoly and economics of infrastructure regulation. From the state to market, changing views on utilities. After World War II, the vertically integrated state-owned utilities became the industry model for electricity, telecommunications, water, natural gas, railways and other transport services. In electricity, for example, the same publicly owned company was often responsible for generating power, transmitting it to local networks and distributing it to retail consumers. Since the early 1980s, however, the monolithic model has proven increasingly unsuited to dramatically changing conditions in both industrial and developing countries. As a result, there has been a worldwide reassessment of public policies for network utilities. For many developing countries, the primary push for privatization came from the debt and fiscal crisis of early 1980s. Another major impetus came from the extraordinary weak performance of infrastructure in these countries relative to industrial countries. Similar reasons motivated the reforms in transition economies in the starting of early 1990s. Heavy debt burdens forced many countries to make fiscal adjustments that hit public investment in infrastructure very hard. In a globalized economy, poorly performing state-owned infrastructure providers were increasingly seen as constrainers on economic growth and underminers of international competitiveness. Developing countries simply could not continue to absorb the fiscal burden of these enterprises. Around the world, it became evident to policymakers that the problems of public enterprises could be solved only by implementing radical structural changes and realigning the roles of the government and the private sector. New utility model. Unbundling, isolating monopoly parts. The historical model of network utilities was premised on the assumption that natural monopoly in some areas of their operations combined with complementaries and coordination requirements between the natural monopoly and other components meant that these industries were best served when they are structured as vertically integrated monopolies. Moreover, monopoly franchises seem to provide an assured base for financing long-term investments. This view was enshrined in the monolithic organization where a single entity controlled all facilities, operations and administrative function and was obliged in accordance with its public utility responsibilities to serve on demand within its territory. In recent years, however, there has been growing recognition that network utilities are not monolithic natural monopolies. Rather, they encompass several distinct activities with entirely different economic characteristics entailing a mix of competition and monopoly elements in supply. Electricity, natural gas, telecommunications, railways and water evolved as vertically integrated industries with transportation, transmission and distribution networks linking upstream production to downstream supply. These networks consist of transmission links in electricity, national pipelines and regional distribution links in gas transmission, media and switching centers in telecommunications, earthworks, track, signals and stations in railways and pipes and sewers in water. Most network components involve substantial fixed costs that are largely sunk because the assets are of minimum value for other purposes. But some components of these industries have cost conditions more conducive to competition, including activities related to upstream production and downstream supply, for example, electricity, gas and water. Certain parts of the network, for example, inter-exchange services in telecommunications and the operation of services on the physical network. Although these activities involve important economies of scale and some sunk costs, they are small relative to those in network infrastructure and are constantly being shrunk by advances in technology. Reflecting these developments, a new paradigm has emerged for the organizational restructuring of network utilities. According to this model, network utilities should be unbundled both horizontally and vertically with different owners for potentially competitive components and natural monopoly components. For competitive or structurally contestable activities, government interference with market mechanism and restrictions on ownership should be relaxed, and the scope for introducing competition through horizontal fragmentation should be fully exploited. Only components involving unavoidable natural monopolies or substantial sunk capital should be placed under regulation and perhaps even operated by the public sector. Technological change, breaking down monopoly barriers. Technological innovation is increasingly driving the move towards competition in network utilities. Changes in production and distribution technologies have had especially dramatic effects on market infrastructure of the electricity and telecommunication industries. In electricity, new technologies have significantly reduced the minimum efficient scale of generating plants, the investment costs of new units and the time needed to plan and build new plants. The telecommunications industry has experienced revolutionary changes as a result of advances in microelectronics, optoelectronics, fixed and mobile internet platforms and plethora of other new technologies. Framework for assessing reforms and regulations. In recent years, infrastructure in developing and transition economies has been plagued by three related problems. One, chronic underinvestment, causing significant deterioration in service quality and seriously undermining providers' ability to respond to new demands and expand service. As a result, large portions of rural and poor urban populations lack access to basic services. Underpricing, with both the level and structure of prices conflicting with the dictates of economic efficiency and arguably with social equity as well. And thirdly, extraordinarily low operating and financial performance with inefficient public utilities draining state budgets, diverting resources from other essential services such as health and education, and impeding domestic economic growth and international competitiveness. One model does not fit all, choosing among imperfect systems. The restructuring of network utilities over the past 2 decades has shown that there is no universally appropriate model for reform. Every restructuring and privatization program must take explicit account of each sector's features and the country's economic, institutional, social and political characteristics. A cookie cutter approach to reform is unlikely to succeed and leads to problems for the public interest. Different sectors demand different reforms. Among network utilities, telecommunication offers the most compelling case for privatization and liberalization in developing and transition economies because revolutionary technological change has almost eliminated natural monopoly. In most developing countries, coverage is very low and the gains from easing restrictions on entry could be substantial. The cross subsidies embedded in monopoly pricing structures cannot be defended on equity grounds because most people with telephone connections are relatively well off. There is a significant scope for flexible pricing to alleviate supply shortages because consumers are willing to pay for new and better services and the sector is suited to competition. The financial, technical and managerial resources of private entities may give them an advantage in keeping abreast of these increasingly complex industries. Unbundling is no panacea. In recent years, policymakers have taken two broad approaches to restructuring utilities. The radical approach has been to vertically separate the monopoly segments like transportation and distribution of these industries from structurally competitive segments, for example, upstream production and downstream marketing. The second approach, called competitive access, allows integrated operations by the dominant incumbent utility on the condition that it makes its bottleneck network facilities available to other entities on a fair and equal basis. Goals for regulation in developing and transition economies. In general, goals of regulation are to promote efficient markets and corrections for market failures. In newly liberalized and privatized infrastructure sectors, regulation should focus on pursuing social fairness and promoting universal services through pricing that balances economic efficiency and social equity. Also ensuring incentives for investment so that reforms draw resources into the sector to expand, modernize and improve infrastructure facilities and services. Also promoting fair competition by lowering entry barriers and giving entrants access to network infrastructure. Facilitating innovation by focusing on goals to be achieved and giving operators and investors the way to introduce more efficient technological and innovative service arrangement. Also protecting public health and safety and avoiding harm to the environment. And lastly, ensuring that even where the private sector takes the lead, services are reliable and networks interoperable. Recent experiences with privatization and reform, promises and perils. Effects on efficiency. Grounds for optimism, future privatization and regulatory reform in developing and transition economies will be determined not just by prevailing economic and political philosophies and macroeconomic conditions, but also by assessments of experiences to date. Reviewing the evidence. At the micro level, evidence indicates that privatization improves the efficiency in terms of labor and total factor productivity and financial performance of utilities and leads to service expansion. This information comes from a variety of studies that have analyzed the pre- and post-privatization performance of individual firms, cross-section of firms from different industries in the same countries, and cross section of firms from different countries. Other studies are more equivocal about economic gains from privatization alone and find that its success or failure depends on post-privatization regulation. Distributive impacts. Need for caution empirical evidence increasingly shows that concerns about privatization and market liberalization's adverse effect on poor people have been largely exaggerated. There is no evidence that such reforms hurt poor or rural consumers, at least in terms of access to service. In low income countries, most rural and many urban poor people do not have basic infrastructure services. So, higher tariffs will primarily affect the middle and upper classes, but in middle income countries, higher tariffs will affect many poor people, especially in urban areas. Effective design. Crucial to success privatization, bad reputation is not fully deserved. Some of the difficulties experienced have resulted from disillusionment and misunderstanding by the general public and poor communication by political leaders. Impatience with the time required for some of the benefits of privatization to emerge reveals a lack of awareness that even in today's rich industrial countries. It often took decades for major institutional reforms to achieve their intended outcomes. But public policies are largely determined by public support. Thus, it is not enough to show that privatization generally improves things. Policies must be designed to ensure that it does and is widely seen to have done so. The first trap, privatization without competitive restructuring. To generate more revenue, some fiscally strapped governments have sold utilities as monopolies accompanied by regulations that ensures this outcome instead of promoting competition. This tendency toward exclusivity has been encouraged by prospective investors and underwriting investment banks. Creating private monopolies involves clear trade-offs. Longer exclusivity secures a higher bid price and so higher immediate proceeds from privatization, while shorter exclusivity stimulates the economy through competition and generates higher recurrent tax revenue. But the basic argument for exclusivity is economically flawed, and as such, arrangements have led to problems after privatization. One of the main arguments against liberalization is that it undermines network expansion and universal service goals under the logic that profit maximizing firms will not find it attractive to extend services to marginal subscribers. But emerging evidence casts doubts on this argument, especially in telecommunications. Exclusivity is likely to be especially damaging in poor countries where the incumbent state-owned monopoly has not provided reliable nationwide service. People without connection to the monopoly network, especially the rural poor, could benefit from the availability of alternative suppliers who might make better use of technological advances and offer a wide range of prices and services than the incumbent monopolist. In the absence of competition, a privatized monopolist may remain lethargic and not innovate or expand coverage, especially if it is restricted by uniform pricing rules. When conditions make competition feasible, it would harm the public interest to privatize a monopoly using exclusivity arrangements. The fiscal benefits from privatizing a monopoly are not worth the costs. The second trap, weak regulatory capacity. Especially during the early years of privatization, establishing appropriate regulation to curb the potential abuse of monopoly power was subordinated to the immediate goal of closing transactions. The limited attention paid to the regulation focused on creating regulatory entities and writing their charters to meet the formal requirements of privatization process or the conditions of international organization. Fiscally constrained governments in constant search of tax revenue would be tempted to retain political control over regulation, leaving monopoly rents to the operators and then taxing them away rather than distributing the efficiency gains of privatization to consumers. Insufficient regulatory capacity can make it difficult for infrastructure reforms to achieve their public interest objectives. Such capacity is required to manage the competitive restructuring of network utilities and subject them to market discipline. So, in developing and transition economies where such capacity is weak, it is one of the main reasons such tasks have not been fully achieved. Second generation reforms, choices and challenges. Since the 1980s, many developing and transition economies have implemented far-reaching restructuring, privatization and regulatory reforms in key infrastructure sectors. Although experiences have varied considerably by country and sector, most of these first generation reforms have generated several of the expected social benefits of market liberalization and private enterprise, including enhanced productivity and cost effectiveness, higher quality output, greater responsiveness to consumer and business needs, and increased investment is driven by market incentives rather than the bureaucratic preferences. Balancing economic efficiency and social equity. Two pressing tasks which are faced by policymakers in developing and transition economies that have led to the introduction of infrastructure reforms. First, they must redress long-standing underpricing of infrastructure, which in many cases has limited service availability, benefited the middle and upper classes, and left large portions of rural and poor urban population without access to basic services. Second, policymakers must pursue social goals such as universal service and access for poor people efficiently and without distorting competition. Adjusting prices. Underinvestment was one of the main problems of the old utility model in developing and transition economies and was largely caused by underpricing. Prices for basic services were held below supply costs, subjecting infrastructure entities to financial distress and impairing their ability to maintain and expand services, especially in poor and rural areas. The failure of many governments to raise prices, especially during periods of high inflation, decapitalized their infrastructure systems. Government subsidies perpetuated the problem until fiscal crunches occurred. Even developing and transition economies that have acted, sometimes aggressively, to stimulate competition in infrastructure have made only minor changes in pricing policies. Policy solutions consistent with both economic efficiency and social equity are not always available or politically feasible. Thus, policymakers in developing and transition economies face not more challenging second generation tasks than designing and implementing pricing reforms that strike a better balance between these two goals. In the long run, pricing policies that lead to insufficient revenue, underinvestment, and inadequate maintenance obviously do not serve the public interest. Moreover, despite their purported focus on social equity, the historic pricing policies of these countries have not served poor people either, since many have not had access to basic infrastructure services. Finding effective alternatives to cross subsidies. Most countries aim to achieve universal access to certain basic infrastructure services. When services were provided by monopolies, typically state owned but occasionally private, these obligations were theoretically funded by subsidies and more commonly cross subsidies. High income and low cost consumers were charged prices above cost to finance services to low income and high cost consumers who paid prices below costs. Subsidies have often been poorly targeted and failed to reach poor consumers. Moreover, the opaque nature of cross subsidies makes it difficult to determine who pays for and who benefits from them. Competition limits the ability to cross subsidize services, but entry and competition also allows entrepreneurs to test new ways of providing services to rural and poor areas, generating a wide range of services, price and quality options. And given the near failure of public monopolies to provide services to poor people, these reforms provide an opportunity to rethink how to fund social goals and ensure such access. If funding through general tax revenue is too difficult or costly, second generation reforms should focus on new methods to raise subsidies. Possible approach includes competitively neutral financing mechanism such as universal service funds and subsidy auctions. Fostering competition after privatization. In many developing and transition economies, developing free markets will require drastic changes in government regulations and business cultures with radically different approaches to oversight and codes of competitive conduct. Given the daunting policy challenges facing these countries in recent years, it is understandable that many governments have paid insufficient attention to competition policy during early stages of infrastructure reform. But competition policy can provide an important complement to other policies aimed at fostering an efficient, dynamic economy, especially in trustee-specific regulatory reform and privatization. Creating competition policy. The first step in devising direct economic regulation, prescribing prices, entry conditions, service requirements, and the like is to determine which markets and services should be subject to it and which are best left to market discipline. This determination is rarely easy. Real-world competition is invariably imperfect, as is regulation. Conventional wisdom predicts that the benefits of even highly imperfect competition will typically exceed those of thoroughly regulated franchise monopoly. Still, it is usually necessary to directly regulate essential services supplied under natural monopoly, although here again it is often impossible to be sure which markets and services are naturally monopolistic and which are perhaps only temporarily so. but sufficiently to justify imposing direct regulation. Regulatory agencies must strike a careful balance between monitoring restructured and privatized infrastructure industries and ensuring that they do not micromanage deregulation and hinder competition in these industries. This is a legitimate concern given the tendency of regulation to expand into areas where it was not intended with undesirable consequences. Still, given the weakness of antitrust agencies in developing and transition economies, regulatory agencies will have to assume a greater monitoring role, at least in the short run. Ensuring access to bottleneck facilities. One of the most vexing tasks facing infrastructure regulators is designing the terms of access to bottleneck facilities for competing service providers. These facilities are essential in producing or delivering final products and are incapable of being economically duplicated. The best examples include the local loop, that is a final mile in telecommunications, the transmission grid in electricity, the network of pipelines in natural gas, and the track in railways. Without good access rules, efficient entry will not materialize in these industries and the benefits of market liberalization will not be obtained. A basic goal of access policy is ensuring competitive parity, meaning that competition in final services or product markets is efficient and does not favor owners of bottleneck facilities or their actual and potential rivals. Rules consistent with competitive parity should minimize the costs of contested services by assigning responsibilities for them based on firms' efficiency as indicated by their production costs and service prices. Adapting regulations. Regulation must adapt to address emerging problems, changing circumstances, and new information in infrastructure sectors. Regulatory adaptation is especially imperative in sectors undergoing rapid technological or market changes. Overcoming resistance to necessary change. Inflexible privatization agreements are often a major obstacle to resolving post-privatization regulatory problems and disputes. Such inflexibilities were probably needed during privatization to create commitments to reform, protect consumers, and attract private investment. But they make it difficult to adapt regulation because many parties consider such changes a threat to the privatization commitments that protect their interests as well as to the entire fabric of reform. Methods are needed to make needed changes in regulation while honoring the interests embedded in privatization agreement. So as a part of second generation reforms, policymakers in developing and transition economies should develop frameworks for revising regulatory mandates and renegotiating concession contracts. Such frameworks must protect the public interest as well as interest of investors and consumers and should promote efficient competition. Resolving disputes. Managing conflicts and resolving disputes are among the most important post-privatization tasks for regulators. Commercial disputes arise in almost every sector of an economy. But because infrastructure industries are so important, disputes between private parties often have significant public interest implications. Thus, regulators of these sectors must actively ensure that such disputes are resolved in a way consistent with the public interest, enhancing consumer participation in regulation. Although infrastructure reforms in developing and transition economies have improved the performance of network utilities, sometimes significantly, many consumers remain dissatisfied with how the situation has evolved. This wariness may partly reflect consumers' perceptions that they were excluded from early decision making, and that even now they have limited opportunities to influence changes in regulation and policy. Thus, enhancing consumer participation in the regulatory process is an important second generation reform. Consumer participation may be desirable for several reasons. Effective participation could provide a needed counterbalance to the strong influence typically exerted by well-heeled industry representatives. It might also provide regulators with political support and protect them from undue political interference in their rule making. Consumer participation in tariff rebalancing would enhance its credibility and might make it more acceptable to the public. Consumers' lack of technical expertise often constrains their effective participation in the regulatory process. Although consumer participation in the regulatory process should be encouraged, the temptation to put consumers on the boards of regulatory agencies and give them the power to vote should be resisted. It is likely to conflict with the requirements of regulatory due process and neutrality. Regulatory policy should seek to balance the interests of consumers and service providers, and such a balance would be disturbed if consumers could vote on regulatory decisions in the same way as if service providers were given voting powers. Let us summarize. The poor financial performance of state-owned utilities was a major cause of fiscal crisis. Thus, the cause and effect relationship between fiscal necessity and privatization is fairly complicated. Moreover, the loan and policy conditions imposed by international financial institutions provided a strong impetus for privatization. The extent to which technological change has been undermining natural monopoly varies considerably by sector and by activity within sectors. Such change has been breathtaking in telecommunications, especially in inter-exchange services, impressive in electricity, that is in generating, and to a much lesser extent transmission and local distribution, modest in transportation and almost negligible in water. Coverage has generally been much higher in transition economies than in developing countries. A package of policy reforms complemented privatization, including restructuring, regulatory reform, market rules and competition.